That's another lesson. Have videos. Have videos. You have to have videos, pictures, flashy graphics to sell a book. You want to get people to sit down and read, you got to have flash and fluff. I know that's totally ironic. There's this TV channel called MTV, and they have to culture all of Americans. So now, if you don't get my attention in 5 seconds with a fuzzy cat video, I'm not interested in it. Videos, flash, photographs, flash. Make sure you have good content. The door to even, you have to attract them to open your door, and that is that nice cover photo. Catherine Brandkamp was talking about that. Hire a professional. Do yourself a favor. You're a writer. You don't need to be good at anything else. And do not fool yourself into thinking, I can just pick up Facebook and cover photos and I'll just shoot a video. No, you're not. Not unless you want to spend as much time dedicated to filmography and photography as you do on your writing. And if you're a writer like me, you don't want to. You're right because you like writing. So if you want to be a photographer, do that. If you want to make movies, do that. If you want to be a writer, focus on that and then hire professionals who are experts in other things and trust them. And make movies. So, here's the book, California's Next Century, and I'll go to 12. Then I'll have 15 minutes for questions. So, who has heard about the Ukraine? Right. Anybody know what's going on there? Yes, please.
Well, a lot of political unrest and invasion.
An invasion by Russia, right? And what are we doing in this country?
Talking about it.
We're talking about it. Now, how many of you think we're actually going to roll up into Ukraine with a bunch of tanks and soldiers and say, no, Russia, we're stopping and we're ready to go to World War III right now to do it? Anybody? Anybody think that's going to happen? Right. Now, here's another little story. Anybody ever heard of someone called Edward Snowden? Yeah. So he's an NSA leaker, he stole secrets, national security, shouldn't have done that, bad boy. Flew to Hong Kong. President of America calls the Chinese government. With the full force and backing of the federal government, this is a national security issue. I demand you give Edward Snowden back to us. Anybody know what the Chinese did? They hung up the phone. That's a fact. They hung up the phone. Just didn't pick up. And they shipped him over to Russia. Russia, full force into the federal government, this national security issue, this could start a war, I demand you hand it back. What did Russia do? No. We're going to make him a citizen. What are you going to do about it? You're going to invade us? You're going to do an embargo? They're talking about how they're going to do an arms embargo or a trade embargo against Russia. Now, no, you're not. And Russia knows it. That's why Russia went into the Ukraine. So here's what's happening. It used to be, this is my map of America. America was number one. It's the only superpower in the world. Top dog. Everybody else is kind of like down here. That's now. Global economists, Goldman Sachs, and multiple American foreign policy scholars are saying, here's what the world's going to look like by 2040. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 superpowers. And each one of them has as much money as America. Now, why is America a military superpower?
World War II.
Yes, but okay, why did America beat the Soviet Union?
No.
The Soviets had to spend 30 to 40% of their budget to get as many guys in nuclear submarines, and we could only spend about 2 or 3% of our budget. So we could spend vastly more money and get more stuff for a fraction of our economy. That's how we were a superpower. That's how we beat the Soviet Union. That's why President Reagan did the massive military spending, because he knew he could bankrupt the Soviet Union based upon a 1970s Air Force report. Can you do that when everybody has as much money as you? No. Now China can spend 3% of their budget and have just as many troops and nuclear arms and tanks and aircraft carriers as everybody. But then so can Russia, and so can India, and so can Brazil, and so can Europe, and so can a collection of Southeast Asian nations known as ASEAN. And then here's America. Going to happen in 2040. Now, have any of you ever heard that before? Yes, you and I have talked. Yes, you have. You're a professor and you deal with international stuff, so yes. Have any of you ever heard your American politicians talk about this?
Yeah, well,
Who?
well, I don't remember their names, but I've heard about China is moving forward, and yeah, this makes sense to me, given the way the global
Awesome.
things have turned
Awesome.
out so far, yeah.
So 2 out of 12? I have spoken at 40 cities around California. Don't take my word for it. Go to YouTube, type in Marcus Ruiz Evans. You'll see the videos. LA, Inland Empire, San Diego, Coastal, Central Valley, Sacramento, Bay Area, Northern Coast. It's always that ratio. There's about 2 people who know and about 80% who what? Huh? No, I don't see this on the news. I don't see my American politicians talk about it. You must be lying. You don't know what you're talking about. You look kind of young. Yeah, you probably, no, this is a farce. What, 300 pages? Multiple citations? Foreign policy scholar James O. Goldsboro endorsed? No, lie. I haven't heard it. It's not on TV, so if I don't see it on TV, it's not real. Anybody remember 9/11? No, I'm not going into the causes. But I am pointing out, this country kind of has this pattern of we don't pay attention, we don't pay attention, we don't pay attention, problem. Explosion, oh, what's going on? How did this happen? React, react. 5 years later, oh, you know, we should have thought about how we reacted. Maybe that was a bad idea, I shouldn't have done this. Oops. So, your politicians are talking about this. We're rocketing to this time. So what do you think is going to happen in 2040? Something's going to blow up in this country. Politically, realistically, whatever. And then everybody's going to be scrambling and you're going to hear all sorts of American politicians. Who could have seen this happen? There was no warning signs. We didn't know the recession was going to happen. We didn't know we were going to be attacked in Pearl Harbor. We didn't know the communist wall was going to fall. We didn't know that this was, yeah, you did.
Yes.
Yeah,
All
you did.
documented.
It's all documented. Yeah, exactly. They knew Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked.
Just about a day of deceit.
Yeah, they knew the economic collapse was going to happen. There were a few economists predicting that they were told to shut up or they lost their jobs.
Yeah, Thornberry.
Exactly. So, your leaders don't want to talk about this future, but it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to stop this. Sort of dinosaurs coming back or a meteor wiping out the earth, going to happen. America's no longer going to be top dog, it's going to be 1 of 7. But it gets worse. And I'm not picking on anybody, I'm not endorsing anything or criticizing. My examples are simply to say this is happening, wake up, we need to deal with this. So, 2003, what happened?
The invasion.
That's right, the Iraq invasion. 2003. Now, in that year, and I'm not condoning or criticizing.
One that was 10 years earlier, too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Your second Iraq invasion.
Yeah.
Okay. Good one. That year, because of that activity, America became the most hated country in the world.
Yes.
I'm not condoning, I'm not criticizing. There's something called the Pew Global Survey. It's called PEW. It's called the Global Attitudes Project. They've been documenting world opinion on America. We trashed our world opinion. We're the most hated country in the world. Yes, more than North Korea and Iran. I'm not asking you to agree. That's the way the world feels. Now, here's the thing. We were told that was a bad president. We're going to get a new president. This new one doesn't act like him. He wants to communicate. He wants to talk, and he does. Anybody want to guess what America's global opinion is today?
Hope it's better, but probably not much.
Oops, it's worse than 2003. Oops, too bad. I'm not condoning or criticizing. The Pew Global Survey points this out. So now we're approaching a 15-year period where this country is not liked. Right before we go into a century where this country's no longer going to be the top one, and it's going to be 1 of 7. Now, this is the example I use. Is anybody willing to be picked on a little bit for an example? Slightly, yeah, thank you. You're going to be very gentle. So,
That's
Greg.
okay.
I think you'll all get the analogy. Greg, for the longest time, was the only guy with $20. If you needed $20, you went to Greg. He had it. You could ask him for it. Now, here's the thing. Greg is really not very nice. Kind of mean and gruff and arrogant and you wouldn't have him over for dinner, and you don't really like him, and you talk bad about him. But you know what? You need 20 bucks, he's the person you go to. Now, what happens when Greg is no longer the only person with 20 bucks, but now there's 6 more?
It's called competition.
Yeah, there's other countries. You know what, Greg? I'm not even talking to you anymore. I'm gonna go to him and get 20 bucks, because he's nice. Or maybe he's not nice, but he hasn't offended me. I remember the time you went over to my house and insulted my mom's cooking. You're thinking that's 20 years ago, but that never left my family. So I'm still kind of upset about that. I don't want your 20 bucks. I don't want your students coming to my country. I don't want to send my students to your country. I don't want to buy your products. I don't want your products coming to my country. I don't want to sign a trade deal. I don't want you speaking on my behalf at the UN. I don't want you representing me at the World Bank. I don't want you talking on my behalf for international banking. Stay out of my life. And I can act like that now. I never would have talked to you this way ever before. Now I've got other stores to go to. Anybody ever heard of Mercosur? Mercosur, M-E-R-C-O-S-U-R. And if you haven't, this is the point. Sorry about that. So, Brazil, anybody heard of NAFTA? NAFTA. Okay, so NAFTA included all of North America. That's a horrible drawing. America wanted to extend NAFTA south of the border, south of Mexico and all of Latin America. Another horrible drawing. They were going to call that the FTAA, Free Trade Agreement of the Americas. Brazil already has a trade bloc called Mercosur, which includes all of Latin America, or South America, Central down. They said, Latin American nations, you are not going to back the FTAA. That is not coming down here. We are kicking out America's economic plan, or I'm going to punish you in my trade bloc called Mercosur. Latin America shut down the FTA, kicked out the NAFTA expansion, and by the way, America is permanently banned from ever being part of Mercosur. Anybody ever heard that? That happened 5 years ago. That's right. Superpower knocked out of an entire global region. What John Kerry this year called America's backyard. How come that's not on the news? How come your American politicians aren't talking about that? Why haven't you seen that in the newspaper? How come we aren't having these conversations over the dinner table? Don't you think that this represents possibly this new world order? Brazil's a superpower. No, America, this is my backyard. Get out. And don't come to my meetings. And don't talk to my friends. Anybody hear about the trade deal between Brazil and China last year?
Yeah, I heard something about that.
Yeah,
Not
so
much.
the American dollar, and the reason your lifestyle is so high is that it's the global reserve currency. And what that means is that any country, whenever they want to trade with another country, has to use US dollars. So even Iran, when they want to sell oil to another country, has to trade in dollars the moment it goes to North Korea or whoever. So even the bad guys use dollars. The North Korean economy is actually a real capitalist economy, and they use dollars more than the actual currency.
They even print them.
Yes, they legally counterfeit them. So China and Brazil just signed a deal last year where they're only going to use Chinese yuan. Dollars blacked out. 2 supermarkets, powers. Anybody hear about that? Any of your American politicians talk about that? You see that on the news? See that in print? Any conversations? No. Now add up Snowden, add up Russia doing what they want in the Ukraine, add up Mercosur, add up China and Brazil. Are you getting the picture? This is the world we're going to. And nobody in this country wants to talk about it.
Well, neither did the British Empire.
Exactly, yeah, you mentioned that. Yes, absolutely. So, that sounds horrible, and it is. But here's the solution. California. So California is the most diverse place in the world. Here's how we're going to make money with that. I'm biracial, I'm Mexican and white. That used to be a bigger issue back 20 years ago than it is today, but I remember being told diversity is our strength. What does that mean? Well, I wanted to see how can you actually convert diversity into an economic power. Turns out you can. People who are exposed to diversity, scientific studies show, are easier at meeting other new people they've never met. So if you grow up in a neighborhood with Mexicans and Koreans, you are more likely to be able to travel to China or Japan and get along with Chinese or Japanese people than if you grew up in the middle of Illinois and all you knew was white people or a small percentage of African Americans. That's what the study showed. Not that radical, right? You're used to meeting different people and having, oh, this person thinks differently, and then you're easier to go to another country and accept those people. That's all the scientific research says. So, if you're the most diverse place in the world, then you are the most open to dealing with other cultures. Now, where does that come into play? Turns out there's two major ways you can make money with that. International corporate negotiations and national dialogue, or what's known as negotiation. Businesses who sign contracts with each other do it because the CEOs got along, because they traveled, because they met. And it turns out that a lot of CEOs who are used to traveling in other countries, maybe know a few languages, just happen to be very good at signing these sort of international business contracts. Diversity equals money. Turns out the best international negotiators for different countries are people who lived in other countries. Best negotiator in Russia is a guy who lived outside of Russia for 30 years. Best negotiator in America, Henry Locke, was the ambassador to China recently, and he was Chinese American. So that's another one. Now, who's ever heard of a little place called Switzerland?
You've been there.
Even live there.
Who's been there? Okay, who's been to Geneva? Outstanding. Outstanding. I am beside myself with jealousy. I agree about it, never gone.
It's a
Geneva.
lovely place.
It's what?
It's a lovely place.
It's a lovely place.
Geneva is beautiful.
The Geneva Accords,
Yeah.
the UN. So there's two UN buildings. We see the one in the UN in New York. There's another one in Geneva, Switzerland. It's not a satellite office, it's a co-equal office. They just don't really publicize that. You heard of these negotiations over Syria? They're happening in Geneva, Switzerland. You want to look at the first agreements between any nation in the world ever. Shipping, telephone, warfare, science, technology, roads, schools. Almost all of them were signed in Geneva, Switzerland. That's because around 1850, and I'm not condoning or criticizing, I'm just saying yes, the world was owned by Europe. Europe went around, they conquered places, and they were expanding their colonies, and they were fighting with each other around the world and each other. The Swiss said, because they got caught up in one of the last things with the guy named Napoleon, that's a long story, you European countries shouldn't fight with each other. You should talk, you should negotiate. We Swiss are negotiators, and we're traders, we make these great watches.
And very diverse country.
And a very diverse, you're already ahead of me, yes.
Yeah.
So you should negotiate Europe, and you'd be more profitable, and there'd be less wars. That's good, right? And you know where you should negotiate Europe? Here in Switzerland. And you know why? Because we Swiss are the living embodiment of you Europeans getting along. Why is that? Because the Swiss, while they have a Swiss identity, are actually 4 different cultures. German, French, Italian, and a group called Romansh. And each region, they still have German culture and speak German. But German descent people in Swiss view themselves as Swiss first. The only German-speaking European country to ever fight the Nazis was Switzerland, because they're Swiss first. But they speak German, and know German culture, and speak French, and know French culture, and Italian, etc. So they said, you know, we know your languages and cultures and how you think, and we're already getting along, have done so for 100 years, and we negotiate, and we're kind of the center of your trade. You should make us your negotiation spot. And that's why the world's first diplomatic university is actually in Geneva, Switzerland, because diplomacy, as you and I know, it started there, because they made this foray. So now, in the last 2 years, the mayor of Geneva and the government of Switzerland have issued 2 reports saying they can probably no longer be the neutral negotiation center of the world. Why do you think that is? I think you have the answer.
Probably because it's more diversity. And
Yes.
They're not the most diverse.
Yes. A European center made sense when Europe owned the world. Europe's only going to be one superpower. America's going to be one. And all the rest of these people are not white people.
Yes.
Sorry, they're not. And so they do things like China says, you have this thing called the World Bank, but it's been around 70 years, and the president of the World Bank, which is supposed to be a bank for all countries, has always been an American and European. and now you're interested in having a Chinese president? It almost sounds like you didn't care what our opinion was, but now that we're as rich as you, suddenly we're important? Why didn't we get to be president the last 70 years? Was Russian, Indian, Chinese, Brazilian, Southeast Asian. Oops. China also doesn't believe the World Trade Organization is fair, or the UN. And China's not alone. Russia, Brazil, India, Southeast Asia, everybody but America and Europe thinks that all of the institutions that have held world peace, the UN, the World Bank, the G20, the IMF, the GTO, are nothing but puppets of America and Europe. Now, I'm not asking you to believe that, but I am telling you that the rest of the world does. And that when you're not well liked,
I just want to say a lot of people in this country think that too.
fair enough, fair enough,
Yeah.
fair enough, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. I caveat that, so, you know.
Thank you.
It's not a good situation. You're not well liked. They're not going to shop at your store. They have other options, and they think that your centers of negotiation are biased. Whether or not that's true, they're not going anywhere, or they're going less. So Brazil has a thing called Mercosur. Started out as a trade union, now they're doing social issues. China has one called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Brazil has Mercosur, India has SARC, Russia has the EUAC, Asia has ASEAN. When the Shanghai Cooperation Organization started in '95, China could only get 3 countries to go to the party. Now they have 25. The UN, when it first started, only had 50 countries. Now it has 210. The EU, when it started, only had 3 countries, and they only talked about trade deals between coal and steel. Now they have all of Europe, and they're basically a separate UN. So while these countries are making their own separate UNs, they're starting small, but they're growing. They're getting more countries, and they're adding on more issues. Now, what happens when, hypothetical scenario, China guns down 100 Americans, right in cold day, on TV, puts it on TV. We're not going to stand for this, China. We're going to the UN. And China says, go ahead. Go to the UN. Make a speech, condemn me, get everybody to sign off, fine, whatever. By the way, your UN has about 150 countries, and so does my Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So which UN is the world actually going to listen to? Go ahead and condemn me. I've got the same number of countries saying I'm a cool guy. So do whatever you want in your UN. I got my own. And everybody's doing that. Everybody. And they all started right after the Berlin Wall fell.
Can I ask you a question? Are you talking about the political level of all these countries? Because there's all these people in these countries, and not everybody thinks that all of this stuff is right. But are
Right.
you speaking from a political standpoint?
Yes, because that's who makes the decisions. It's
Well,
like
that's fine, I just
yeah.
want to be clear.
Sure.
And not as people, but as a political system that doesn't regard, in many countries, including your country, people like the Native Americans.
Absolutely. Good point. And the governments are going to still make their decisions.
Because I think it's really important, because I think the amount of people now on the planet is going to make a difference in how this continues to play out. And people in each country is going to speak up in things that are.
I hope so.
Change things. I hope so too.
I hope so. We'll have to see if it happens.
I hope so.
We don't have hard proof that's happening or that's going to go that way, but we do have hard proof that this is going to go this way.
We have Snowden. and a
We
lot
have
of
Snowden, and
reporting.
maybe that'll
So, you know,
expand, but I can tell you that a better trend to follow as something that's guaranteed going to happen is what world economists are saying, where these countries are going to form off,
Yeah.
make a multipolar world,
If
whether
we're
or not
in
they're
the money
opposed.
system and we continue on the way we're going, is the money system is the only thing that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
So how are we gonna fix it? Come on, you're bumming me out. We only got
Okay.
10 more minutes.
So, where is the place in the world with Americans, Europeans, Russians, Brazilians, Indians, Chinese,
Right.
with all their cultures intact and their languages, and who lived in peace together for over 100 years? Anybody want to name that?
California.
Right.
And we even had Arnold Schwarzenegger as
We
governor.
even had Arnold Schwarzenegger. Where was the first UN supposed to be located?
San Francisco.
San Francisco, California.
Oh,
That's
The
why it's called
American
UN
federal
Council.
government overruled it and said, no, you're going to move that to New York because it's next to Washington, D.C. And this is the kind of thing China and India, Brazil says looks like it's a puppet.
Right.
So, world chose us first. Already have an international reputation. The first meeting between the American president and the Chinese president was here in California, specifically because the Chinese said that's the only place we're going to meet you for a first meeting. Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, flew to California, did a tour of Silicon Valley, flew back to Russia, didn't stop anywhere else in the rest of America. Prime Minister Tony Blair flew from England to California, did a press conference with Governor Schwarzenegger on climate change, flew back to England, didn't stop anywhere else. The most famous couple in India did their honeymoon tour here in California, and the whole thing was covered about the Indian economy. So we already have a brand name, we're already known amongst the nations, and we're the only people that have what the Swiss did 100 years ago, but for the next 100. So here's my option. We take over as the negotiation and trade center. By the way, LA Port is already the biggest center in America, and it's one of the top 5 in the world. By the way, we already have the Bohemian Grove organization, which has been meeting for 60 years and includes world leaders and all the important leaders of America. By the way, we have the Milken Global Conferences, which have been going on for 20 years and are basically UN-type meetings with multiple hundreds of diplomats. By the way, the CIA asked a intelligence review committee in the Bay Area to do their next outlook on global outcomes. So, world reputation, already doing negotiation and trade, and we have what the Genovese had. I know it's radical, but I'm going to leave it at this. What option do you got? Switzerland can't do it. UN's failing, World Bank's failing, IMF's failing, G20's failing, WTO is failing. American foreign policy scholars that I quote in here are saying, please God, do not let it become a multipolar world, because then you're very likely to have world wars, or what's known as regional wars, where 2 superpowers are always going to war against each other, and while not the rest of the world's involved, the economy is essentially collapsed because it causes so much friction. So, get yourself out of the recession, because we're still in it. Don't know when we're getting out. Some economists say it's not until 2024. We Californians have the option to grow this economy right now, today. We already have nubs that we're doing. We can fulfill this role, and if we don't, nobody else is going to do it. You're going to give up this industry, and you're going to wait and see if World War III happens. So why don't you help the world out and help yourself?
World War III could happen with the Japanese and the Chinese fighting over that little chunk of.
Fair enough. And where is the only place in the world that has a high Japanese and Chinese population that could negotiate with each other? Right here. Absolutely.
I think you've got some very interesting information that's very important. And at the same time, I wanted to go back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Turn it over to questions.
Thank you. And I really appreciate your work, by the way. I think that it's vitally